For these two problems, we are going to rewrite the equation in intercept form, and then we're going to graph it using Desmos. So to put it in intercept form, we have to factor, like you did in the factoring module. First thing you do, check to see if there's a greatest common factor, and there is, which is a 2. What's left over is x squared minus 4. Your middle term here is technically 0. So if you guys remember, this is called the difference of two squares. Your first term is a perfect square. Your last term is a perfect square. They can be square rooted. So you have two sets of parentheses. That means one's a plus and one's a minus. How do you make an x squared? Well, that's x and x. How do you make the 4 that's identical? That would be your 2 and your 2. All right, so now we are in intercept form. Just by looking at it, this should technically have an intercept at -2. This should have an intercept at +2. And then hopefully you can figure out the number in between those, which would be 0. All right, so let's go to Desmos and see what we have there. We had a 2 that we took out. We had x plus 2, and we had an x minus 2. All right, so if you notice, we have a 0 at -2, a 0 at +2. We said the middle of those two was 0. And if you look at the table, or if you look at the actual graph, your vertex is at 0, -8. Your axis of symmetry would be x equals 0. All right, let's try that other problem. We need to factor that one. We're going to have two parentheses. Factor using a box, using x, or just using the parentheses. It's up to you. If we use the x, it's -3 on the top, 2 on the bottom. What two numbers make that for you? That would be a +3 and a -1. So that would be x plus 3, x minus 1. If you were the table people, or I'm sorry, the box people, you put x squared here, -3 here. That multiplied to -3x squared. That added to 2x. What were those numbers? And that was 3x and -1x. So those are the numbers that go in the box. So then you had x, 3, -1. All right, and that's where you got the parentheses from. So by looking at this, you should have a 0 at -3, and you should have a 0 at +1. Okay, let's go graph that. X plus 3 and x minus 1. So we have x plus 3, x minus 1. Let's turn that one off. All right, so by looking at our information over here on the left, we should have a dot at -3, which we do. We should have a dot at 1. What is the middle number between those two? Well, -3 and a 1 would be -2. Divided by 2 is -1. And if you look right there, you have the axis of symmetry is at -1, and the vertex as a whole is at -1, -4.